Hello, all my YouTube viewers. I've got the best viewers in the whole wide world. Goodness gracious, you've all been so supportive of me doing this on the sly here. At least that's what I'm going to call it when I have to record it ahead of time so you can all hear it when it's supposed to be heard while I fool with this festival. Boy, I'll tell you what, today was a slow day because it kept threatening rain all day, and so the people didn't get out like what they did last year. That and the fact the lady next door did not have her huge sale that helped draw in people. So, man, it was kind of sparse today. But it's supposed to rain all night tonight, and we'll see what kind of a day it's going to be tomorrow. Maybe it'll be a little bit better as time progresses here. Say Friday and Saturday are supposed to be bright and sunny, so if we can make it through tomorrow, then by Friday and Saturday we ought to be doing a lot better. But other than that, they did not have the tractor parade this year. I was a little disappointed. They've always had the tractor parade. This is the 51st year, and the first year they didn't have a tractor parade. All those antique tractors, and I was really counting on being able to film that for you because I knew you guys would enjoy that. But, well, they didn't do it, so I didn't get it filmed, and oh well. We'll see. We'll see if anything else exciting happens in the next couple of days. I got the videoer at the ready, so we'll see if somebody does something worth getting on film. But other than that, there's been a lot of news, so we're just going to hop right on into it here, and we'll bring you up to speed on what's going on in the world. First one I've got is off of Fox News World, and it says at least 159 dead, 368 others hurt as a strong earthquake rocks central Italy. This happened last night, and it says rescue workers were searching through the night Wednesday, nearly 24 hours after at least 159 people were killed and hundreds of others were injured by a powerful earthquake that destroyed a cluster of small mountain villages in central Italy. Italy's health minister, said that many of the victims were children. Premier Matteo Renzi said the death toll was likely to rise. At least 368 people were injured. "She's alive," two women cheered as they ran up the street in Pescaria del Tronto, three hardest hit hamlets, after a 10-year-old girl was pulled from the rubble after nightfall on Wednesday. "Unfortunately, 90% we pulled out are dead, but some make it. That's why we are here," said Christian Benchetti, a volunteer from Ready working in the village of Amatrice, where floodlights were set up so the rescue could continue through Wednesday night. Amatrice, a village of 2,700, about 60 miles north of Rome, was devastated by the magnitude 6.2 quake, which struck at 3:36 a.m. local time and was felt as far away as the Italian capital. "The town isn't here anymore," said Amatrice Mayor Sergio Peronzi. "We came out to the piazza, and it looked like Dante's Inferno," said Agostino Severo, a Rome resident visiting Elisa. "People were crying for help. Rescue workers arrived after 1 hour and a half hours. The trembler shook Lazio region and Umbria and La Marcia on the Adriatic coast, a highly seismic area that has witnessed major quakes in the past. The area is also a popular spot for Romans with second homes, and the population swells in August when most Italians take their summer holiday before school resumes. Amatrice was full for the planned weekend festival honoring its native dish, the spaghetti al amatriciana sauce. Some 70 guests filled its top hotel, Roma, famed for its amatriciana, and a rescue worker said at least 5 bodies were pulled from the hotel's rubble. The fate of the dozens of other guests wasn't immediately known. Italy's Civil Protection Agency set up tent cities around each hamlet to accommodate the thousands of homeless. The medieval center of Amatrice was devastated, with the hardest hit half of the city cut off by rescue crews digging by hand to get to trapped residents. Amatrice is made up of 69 hamlets that teams from around Italy were working to reach with sniffer dogs, earth movers, and other heavy equipment to reach residents. In the city center, rocks and metal tumbled into the streets, and dazed residents huddled in piazzas, and more than 200 aftershocks jolted the region throughout the day, some as strong as magnitude 5.1. Ceiling fell, marveled resident Marina Gani. I just managed to put a pillow on my head and I wasn't hit. Luckily, just slightly injured my leg. Another woman sitting in front of her destroyed home with a blanket over her shoulders said she didn't know what had become of her loved ones. One of the most beautiful towns of Italy, and now there's nothing left. Too distraught to give her name. I do not know what we'll do. As the August sun turned into a nighttime chill, residents, civil protection workers, and even priests dug with shovels, bulldozers, and their bare hands to reach survivors. A steady column of dump trucks brought tons of twisted metal, rock, and cement down the hill and onto the highway toward Rome, along with a handful of ambulances bringing the injured to Rome hospitals. We need chainsaws, shears to cut iron bars, and jacks to remove beams. Everything we need, everything. Civil protection worker Andrea Gentile told the Associated Press in the early hours of the recovery. Italy's National Blood Drive Association appealed for donations to Righetti's hospital. But the massive rescue and relief effort with Army Alpine crews, let me see if I can figure out how to pronounce this, Carabinieri firefighters, Red Cross crews, and volunteers, it wasn't enough. A few miles north of Amatrice in Alicia, residents complained that rescue workers were slow to arrive and that loved ones were trapped. The military, said resident Alessandra Capinelli. There is a base in Ascoli, one in Rieti, and in L'Aquila, and we have not seen a single soldier. We pay. It's disgusting. The U.S. Geological Survey reported the quake magnitude was 6.2, while the Italian Geological Service put it at 6, and the European Mediterranean Seismological Center at a 6.1. The quake had a shallow depth of between 2.5 and 6 miles, the agency said. Generally, shallow earthquakes pack a bigger punch and tend to be more damaging than deeper quakes. The Apennine Mountains have the highest seismic hazard in Western Europe, and earthquakes of this magnitude are common, noted Dr. Richard Walters, a lecturer in earth science at Durham University in Britain. And harkened back to the 2009 quake that killed more than 300 people in and around Aquila, about 55 miles south of the latest quake. The town, which hasn't fully recovered, sent emergency teams Wednesday to help with the rescue and set up tent camps for residents unwilling to stay indoors because of the aftershocks. I don't know what to say. We are living this immense tragedy, said a tearful Reverend Savino D'Amelio in Amatrice. We are only hoping there will be the least number of victims possible and that we all have the courage to move on. In Pescaria del Toronto, where the main road was covered in debris, residents were digging their neighbors out by hand before emergency crews arrived. Aerial photos taken by regional firefighters showed the town and under a thick gray coat of dust. Italy requested EU satellite images of the whole area to get the scope of the damage. There are broken liquor bottles all over the place, said Guido Petrucci, owner of a bar in nearby Aqueta del Toronto, where he was the long cleanup. One rescue was particularly delicate as a ranger in Cappadocia in the Marche province of Ascoli Piceno diplomatically tried to keep an 80-year-old woman calm as she begged to get to the toilet, even though she was trapped in the rubble. Listen, I know it's not nice to say, but if you need to pee, you just do it, he said. Now I move away and a little bit and you do pee, please. Of Acomoli, Stefano Petrucci said a family of 4 had died there, one of the few young families who had decided to stay in the area. He wept as he noted that the tiny hamlet of 700 swells to 2,000 in the summer months and that he feared for the future of the town. As he told Sky TG24, President Barack Obama, speaking by telephone to Italian President Sergio Mattarella, said the U.S. sent its thoughts and prayers to the quake victims and saluted the quick action by first responders. White House spokesman Josh Earnest said. A 1997 quake killed a dozen people in central Italy and severely damaged one of the jewels of Umbria, the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi, filled with frescoes. The Franciscan friars, custodians of the basilica, reported no immediate damage from Wednesday's tremor. Pope Francis skipped his traditional catechism for his Wednesday general audience and instead invited the thousands of pilgrims in St. Peter's Square to recite the rosary with him. He also sent a 6-man squad from the Vatican's fire department to help with the rescue. So there you have the story on the quake in Italy. Sad, sad, sad for those people. Mercy, mercy. Heart goes out to them. We have is off the New York Times. It says North Korea test fires missile from submarine. Seoul, South Korea. North Korea test fired missile from a submarine off its eastern coast on Wednesday, demonstrating a significant improvement in its efforts to build a hard-to-detect means to strike American and allied forces, the South Korean military said. Launched from near Sinpo, a submarine base, flew 310 miles toward Japan, the South Korean military said in a statement. The statement said that the test showed that North Korea was making progress after several failed tests of submarines, or after several failed tests of submarine-launched ballistic missiles, or SLBMs. All previous such missiles North Korea had launched flew only short distance, making those flights too brief to be called successful, according to South Korean officials. Missile experts have said that North Korea probably conducted some of its previous tests from a submerged barge rather than from a submarine, releasing digitally altered photographs to exaggerate its missile technology for its home audience. Later on Wednesday, in a statement issued after a meeting of its top security officials, South Korea confirmed that the latest North Korean SLBM test had been conducted from a submarine. This came 2 days after the United States and South Korea kicked off one of their annual joint military exercises. North Korea condemns all such drills as a rehearsal for an invasion and has often responded with warlike words or missile tests. The test also came hours before the foreign ministers of South Korea, Japan, and China were to continue talks to discuss the North's growing missile and nuclear threat, as well as territorial and other disputes in the region. We see this SLBM test as an attempt by the North to use the South Korean United States military exercise as a pretext to raise tensions, the South Korean military said. It also said the test posed a serious threat to South's security and marked a grave violation of the United Nations Security Council resolutions that bar the North from developing ballistic missile technology. North Korea's growing missile threats have been unsettling enough for the United States and South Korea to decide to deploy the American-built Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, or HAAD, battery in the South by the end of next year, despite a vehement protest from China. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan, noting that the launch marked the first time that North Korea missile had penetrated his country's air defense identification zone, where it tries to identify and locate passing aircraft for security purposes, is called the test a grave threat to our country's security. So there you have an update on what's going on with the North Korea missiles. The next one that we have is off of BizPac Review. FBI files connecting Hillary Clinton to Vince Foster's suicide vanish. National Archives say unable to locate. How convenient. The Clintons should quit politics and take their magic show on the road because they have an unbelievable knack for making things disappear. Talking about emails this time, it has nothing to do with FBI records that have mysteriously vanished, according to an investigative reporter. Donald Kessler, formerly with the Washington Post and Wall Street Journal, wrote an exclusive piece for the Daily Mail chronicling his experience trying to get records pertaining to the death of one-time Clinton friend and ally Vince Foster. Foster, who served as deputy White House counsel for the first few months of Bill Clinton's administration, was found dead at Fort Marcy Park in 1993, and what officials believe was a suicide. Led by Kenneth Starr uncovered that a public shaming doled out by Hillary Clinton in front of White House colleagues could have been what ultimately pushed Foster over the edge. When Kessler used the Freedom of Information Act to obtain records, he was essentially stonewalled. And there's an insert here that says, on the first visit, archivist David Painter provided the box of records that he said contained the FBI reports of interviews conducted by FBI agents on Foster's death. On a second visit, archivist James Mathis provided what he said were those same documents. While the box contained dozens of FBI reports concerning Foster's death, including interviews with the medical examiner, U.S. Park police officers, and White House aides about contents of Foster's office, the reports on Hillary Clinton's role in his death were absent. And the article goes on and says, John Valenciu, the archives director and communications and marketing, wasn't any help. We do not agree with your conclusion that the records you requested are missing from the National Archives simply because we were unable to locate any responsive records in response to your request, he told Kessler. Valenciu, however, did say the records may have never been filed correctly in the first place and could be somewhere in the 3,000 boxes, amounting to 7.5 million pages generated by the Starr investigation, Kessler reported. In other words, good luck finding those. Unfortunately, and for unknown reasons, Starr did not include the FBI's findings in his final report, but interviews suggested there was a lot of pertinent information. Kessler reported, in the interviewing Clinton White House aides and Foster's friends and family, the FBI found that a week before Foster's death, Hillary held a meeting at the White House with Foster and other top aides to discuss her proposed health care legislation. Hillary angrily disagreed with a legal objection Foster raised at the meeting and ridiculed him in front of his peers, former FBI agent Coy Copeland and former FBI supervisor agent Jim Clemente told me. Copeland was Starr's senior investigator and read the reports of other agents working for Starr. Hillary put him down really, really bad in a pretty good-sized meeting, Copeland said. She told him he didn't get the picture and he would always be a little hick town lawyer who was obviously not ready for the big time. Foster was reportedly profoundly depressed, but according to several accounts, it was Clinton's merciless berating that was the final straw. Hillary blamed him for failed nominations, claimed he had not vetted them properly, and said that in front of his White House colleagues, you're not protecting us, and you have failed us, Clemente said. So there you have an update on the Foster death. Have is off freebeacon.com, and this one says, Southern Command warns Sunni extremists infiltrating from the south. Sunni extremists are infiltrating the United States with the help of alien smugglers in South America and are crossing U.S. borders with ease, according to U.S. South Command intelligence report. The Command J2 Intelligence Directorate reported recently in internal channels that special interest aliens are working with a known alien smuggling network in Latin America to reach the United States. The smuggling network was not identified. Army Colonel Lisa Garcia, a Southcom spokeswoman, did not address the intelligence report directly, but said Sunni terrorist infiltration is a security concern. You think? Networks that specialize in smuggling individuals from regions of terrorist concern, mainly from Afghanistan, Pakistan region, the Middle East, and East Africa, are indeed a concern for Southcom and other interagency security partners who support our country's national security, Garcia told the Washington Free Beacon. There are major hubs that serve as entry points into the region for migrants from those areas of concern attempting to enter the U.S. along our border with Mexico, she said. The infiltration from terrorist states and unstable regions exploit vulnerabilities in commercial transportation systems and immigration enforcement agencies in some of the countries used for transit, Garcia said. In 2015, we saw a total of 331,000 migrants enter the southwestern border between the U.S. and Mexico. Of that, we estimate more than 30,000 of those were from countries of terrorist concern, she said. Another problem in dealing with migrants from Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia is a lack of information among the governments of the countries used by potential terrorists for transit. The exploitation of alien smuggling networks by terrorists until recently had been dismissed by both American security officials and private security experts as largely an urban myth. However, the Southcom intelligence report revealed that the threat of Islamist terror infiltration is no longer theoretical. This makes the case for Trump's wall, said one American security official of the Southcom report. These guys are doing whatever they want to get in the country. Admiral Kurt Tidd, Southcom's commander, said last week that the lack of information is hampering security efforts against alien smuggling, an element that has been long recognized that is that our ability to track people moving through transportation systems is an area we must continue to devote efforts on. And the ease with which human traffickers are able to use our transportation systems to move people through the networks relatively undetected should give us all concern, Tidd said. Special interest aliens are described by the U.S. government as aliens who pose a potential terrorism threat coming from 34 nations in the Middle East, Africa, Southwest Asia, Central Asia, and East Asia. The list of states of concern include Afghanistan, Iran, Kuwait, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Eritrea, I guess it is, Libya, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump last week called for stepped-up counterterrorism measures that he said would involve extreme vetting of immigrants in a bid to better screen out potential terrorists. Trump also has made a campaign theme the construction of a wall across the United States southern border as part of efforts to better control the flood of illegal immigrants. Joe Vargas, head of Contingent Security Services, and a consultant to law enforcement agencies said there is no evidence Sunni extremists are creating new relationships with alien smugglers. However, he said in an email that existing networks from Central America are increasing their access. We have intercepted immigrants coming from Asia, but we have been unable to determine if they are extremists, Vargas said. Our Sunni illegal immigration coming from Latin America is very small. On the other hand, they can use networks set up by a report produced by Vargas for the International Airport, Seaport, and Transport Police states that Iran-backed Shiite terror group Hezbollah mainly has ties to Latin America through overseas Lebanese expatriates. Hezbollah recently increased support in a transnational crime in the region by supplying arms and training to various groups. Hezbollah's current goals appear to be focused on accruing resource rather than conducting offensive operations. However, the group's growing capabilities are still a clear threat to regional U.S. interests, the report said. Iran's involvement in Latin America is also increasing, and Hezbollah will likely be able to use these budding political and economic ties as cover for its operations. Vargas said Hezbollah's networks in Latin America could be used by Sunni extremists to get to the United States. That's a workable situation, he said, if they disclose they are ISIL or any other group. I doubt that even the Shias would help out. Even drug cartels are killing anyone who appears extremist. It's bad for their business. According to Vargas, Guatemala remains a weak link for regional security services. A sophisticated alien smuggling operation that is capable of moving foreign nationals into the United States from Africa and other states has been centered in that Central American state for at least the past 6 years. The Washington Times reported in June that an international alien smuggling network centered in Brazil helped sneak illegal immigrants from Middle Eastern states to the United States, including an Afghan link to a terror plot in North America. At least a dozen Middle Easterners reached the Western Hemisphere through alien smuggling ring and facilitated travel to Mexico, Times reported, quoting internal government documents. The aliens involved, Palestinians, Pakistanis, and the Afghan man with ties to the Taliban. Some of the aliens were stopped before entering the United States, but others succeeded in crossing the U.S. border. One transit route used in the past by alien smugglers was identified in a recent Justice Department alien smuggling case that traced illegal immigrants from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa to Honduras, then to Guatemala, and finally to Mexico and into the United States. The cost of getting into the United States can reach $400 or more per person, and the illegal immigrants are provided with transportation, covert smuggling contacts along routes into the country, as well as instructions on how to illegally cross the U.S. border. The instructions in the past have included armed guides who ferry illegal aliens across the U.S.-Mexico border rivers on inner tubes. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper testified during a Senate hearing in February that Islamic State terrorists would try to infiltrate the United States posing as immigrants. That's one technique they've used, is taking advantage of the torrent of immigrants to insert operatives into that flow, Clapper said. As well, they also have available to them and are pretty skilled at phony passports, so they can travel ostensibly as legitimate travelers as well. So there you have an update on the illegal aliens coming in, the extremists. Next one we have is off the BBC.com. It says Germans told to stockpile food and water for civil defense. For the first time since Cold War, the German government is advising citizens to stockpile food and water for use in national emergency. Some opposition MPs said the new civil defense concept to go before ministers on Wednesday was scaremongering. Citizens are advised to store enough food to last them 10 days because initially a disaster might put national emergency services beyond reach. 5 days of water, 2 liters, half gallon per person daily is advised. The German news website, Frankfurter Allgemeine, I guess. Gosh, I can't pronounce these names because I'm not foreign. Otherwise known as FAZ, I can do that, said the new concept was set out in a 69-page German Interior Ministry document. The document said an attack on German territory requiring conventional defense of the nation is unlikely, but it said a major security threat to the nation in future could not be ruled out, so civil defense measures were necessary. Soon Germans began tweeting ironically under the hashtag hamster Kiev. And in parentheses, it says panic buying. It says Interior Minister Thomas D. Mazari told a group of school children that Germany must be prepared to react if water or food reserves were poisoned or if oil and gas supplies were interrupted. The parliamentary head of the left-wing Die Link party, Dietmar Bartsch, criticized the move, saying you can completely unsettle people with yet another round of proposals, such as hoarding supplies. The Greens' deputy parliamentary leader, Konstantin von Naus, said it was sensible to update civil defense advice, which had not been touched since 1995. But he warned against mixing up possible military or terrorist scenarios, saying, I can't see any attack scenario that merits a stockpiling of supplies by the population. And then it has some bullet points here. The first one is about 2,000 public bunkers and shelters were built in West Germany with federal funding. Former East Germany had its own communist network of shelters. The next one is there was a wide mix of shelters in garages, schools, and private cellars. Next one, a special government nuclear bunker was built in Bad Neuebar Antweiler, 30 kilometers or 19 miles from Bonn. Next one, law says Cold War era shelters must not be converted into new types of building. Next one, Germany still has stockpiles of food, such as milk powder and beans at secret locations for national emergency. Next one, inventories are regularly checked and renewed. Next one, emergency officials to issue food and fuel stamps under national rationing system in a disaster. So there's that. And all these URLs are in the description of the video if you want to check them out for yourself. So I haven't left you hanging. Next one is off of BizPack Review. It says confirmed abuse. Check out the donor's special access that new Clinton emails revealed. The conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch released new treasure trove of State Department emails indicating the agency gave preferential access to Clinton Foundation donors. In all, Judicial Watch released 725 pages of State Department documents, including 20 Hillary Clinton work-related email exchanges that the former Secretary of State neglected to turn over to the Department of State. Many of other email exchanges suggest that longtime Clinton aide and confidant Huma Abedin was used as a conduit between the Secretary of State and large Clinton Foundation donors, those who contributed $25,000 to $10 million. Abedin appeared to give those donors special access to then Secretary of State Clinton as the request of Clinton Foundation executive Doug Band. One of the newly released Clinton emails included this exchange with Abedin, where the two discuss delaying the departure of Secretary of State's aircraft to fit in a meeting with billionaire businessman Danny Abram. And then here's a little excerpt in it that's interesting. Abedin says, Danny Abram called this morning. He is in D.C. today and tomorrow and asked for 15 minutes with you. Do you want me to try to fit him in tomorrow? And Clinton says, will the plane wait if I can't get there before 7 or 8? And Abedin says, yes, of course. The article goes on, says Abram donated between $5 million and $10 million to the Clinton Foundation, according to the New York Post. Abram was mentioned in another email when Abedin wrote Clinton, Danny, Abram wants to talk to you about Israel, ideally before you see Lieberman, referring to June 17, 2009 meeting scheduled with Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman. Judicial Watch reported the newly obtained Abedin emails also contain a memorandum sent to Cheryl Mills from State Department White House liaison Laura Pena, revealing that Rajiv Fernando was proposed for his controversial appointment to the Sensitive International Security Advisory Board as early as June 2009. Fernando was not actually appointed until 2011, and his appointment raised a firestorm because, according to the ABC's news report, he had no obvious experience in the field. Fernando donated $1 million to the Clinton Foundation. These new emails confirm that Hillary Clinton abused her office by selling favors to Clinton Foundation donors. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton said, there needs to be serious independent investigation to determine whether Clinton and others broke the law. In addition to those released by Judicial Watch, the FBI has uncovered almost 15,000 emails that Clinton failed to turn over to the Department of State when she stepped down as the secretary. So there you have another one on her. Guilty as sin. Next one's off the All News Pipeline, the latest attack on America, what is happening to our country. Exactly what we were warned of in the House of Congress decades ago. And this says, the little question comes from Facebook post by a man named Micah Brin, who uploaded an image of a form that was sent home with his niece from Leon County Schools, Tallahassee, Florida, along with mother's response to school written on form in lieu of her signature. His message with the form, you will see below, was, my niece brought this home from school today. What is happening to our country? And the paper says, Pledge of Allegiance request. Fill in the requested information. Complete and return to your child's school. And there's a place for the student's name and their grade and their school. And here's what it says. It says, I understand my right as parent, and I request that my child, noted above, be excused from reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. This request includes standing and placing his or her right hand over their heart. And the parent wrote in the blank here where they're supposed to sign. It says, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read, and I'm so ashamed of this. And the article goes on and says, this isn't the first time Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag has come under attack. It's just the latest attack on America, our culture, our values, and the words under God, which was added to the Pledge of Allegiance in 1954. In 2010, a school in Massachusetts came under fire for asking parents to sign permission slips before their children could recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Attached to the letter was a form that asked parents to check either yes, my child will participate in the weekly Pledge of Allegiance, or no, my child will not participate in the weekly Pledge of Allegiance. I urge you to have a conversation as family to help your children understand why I will be reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and to support them in feeling comfortable and confident in the decision on whether or not to participate, Martinez wrote in the letter. The school also sent parents a copy of the Pledge of Allegiance along with a note that defined the words under God as meaning there is one supreme entity for every citizen. The reaction to Mr. Breen for highlighting this on his Facebook page has been supportive, leading him to state, never in my life have I been more encouraged to be an American citizen and a patriot, as reactions range from outrage to suggestions that any parent that wants to opt their children out of reciting the Pledge of Allegiance should be forced to pay for their children's own education to one woman responding, I love the response on the request. So let me get this straight. To become a citizen, you have to learn and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights, but do not require American children in public schools to pledge their allegiance to their country flag. It was the following response that caught my eye from Jonathan Moore, who stated the education system is run by Marxists, so it's not surprising, however. I do feel they need a swift kick in the arse. Bingo. And then it gives a school name and address and phone numbers and stuff here for you to contact, I guess, to set them straight. This is everything we are seeing across college campuses today, from teachers to new social justice warriors, special snowflakes attending those colleges, all the way down to elementary schools, where a child can be suspended for chewing a Pop-Tart in the shape of a gun and be tracked back to a warning that was given to Americans on January the 10th of 1963, where a list of 45 current communist goals were entered into a record by Representative A.S. Herlong Jr., a Democrat from Florida, credited to a book titled The Naked Communist by Cleon Sokusin, or Sokusin, I guess it is. Those goals can be read by PDF or here by a web page, and you click that link and read that if you want to. It says going through the whole list and seeing how many of those goals have already been completed should send chills down the spine. But in regards to this article, we note number 13, which states do away with all loyalty oaths. We also note number 17, which states get control of schools, use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda, soften the curriculum, get control of teachers' associations, put party line in textbooks. Number 19 also describes what we are seeing across the colleges and America today as communist groups declare war on law enforcement across the country, with BLM and MBPP threatening to kill police. It states use student rights to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. Many of the goals read into the record of 1963 have already been accomplished, such as number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States will be a demonstration of moral strength. Number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as one world government with its own independent armed forces. Some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other, as they are now doing so in the Congo. Number 16, use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Number 20, infiltrate the press, get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policymaking positions. Number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Number 27, infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Number 28, eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. Number 29, discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. Number 30, discredit the American founding fathers, present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. Number 32, support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. Those are just a few of the most egregious examples of this long-term plan and how it has only taken a little more than 5 decades to bring about the destruction of the America our founding fathers envisioned. The results of this ongoing attack against America can be seen in events surrounding us every day, where many believe we are watching prophecy play out before our very eyes as judgment against America for abandoning God. Wow. So there you have that. The next one that we have is off of Health Impact News. Homeschool Texas family terrorized by CPS for speaking out and for having too many children at home. And then there's a picture of these kids that says, Rebus children, the day CPS investigated their home on May the 16th. They had only been living in Lubbock for about 2 weeks, and their furniture had not yet arrived. And the image was provided by the Rebus family. And the article reads, Claire and William Rebus recently moved to Lubbock County, Texas, for a new job offer in May, but little did they know that Lubbock CPS was considered the worst county in all of Texas in terms of removing children from families, according to one Texas attorney. The Rebus had only been living in Lubbock County for 2 weeks when CPS started investigating their family all over again. Initiated by a call that one of their daughters was out in the front yard alone, they thought their nightmare with Texas CPS was over when Judge Wheelis dismissed their case last year and rebuked the Collin County social worker for clearly harassing them. Their lives were about to be turned upside down and scrutinized all over again. And then there is a picture of this cause where it says order dismissing the order to participate, if you want to take a look at that. And the article goes on, it says CPS kidnaps 11 children from Texas homeschool family. CPS allegedly has persistently accused the Rebus of being against CPS at their last hearing on August the 9th because they exercised their First Amendment right and spoke out on medicalkidnap.com, Facebook, YouTube, and various radio shows about CPS abuses. According to Claire, the family began to fear for their physical safety because the social worker, Kristen Scheckling, became increasingly aggressive and intimidating. Claire reports that Scheckling would pound on the door multiple times a day, even bringing large threatening men along with her to pound on the door, while Scheckling would walk around the house peeking in windows and yelling. Claire pleads. And the insert says, we are terrified. I feel like I'm reading a book about a missionary in China or Anne Frank. Someone dialing a number, making a call just like that. It can end everything. This is so scary. Our kids, they color, they read, they play outside. We don't do drugs. We don't have a criminal history. I just don't understand. This is too much. It's just so heavy. We are such a normal, boring, uneventful, laid-back, happy family. I just cannot wrap my mind around all of this. This can't really be happening again. I almost wish that we had an issue or two that we could blame for all of this, because then we could fix it. And if we could fix it, CPS would never be involved in our lives again because it was fixed. Children abused and traumatized while in state custody last year. It says the Rebus are concerned first and foremost about the safety of their children and know that when their children were in state custody for only a few short days last year, they were abused. This raises safety concerns for the Rebus about CPS and their need to protect their children from CPS. The Rebus children were not only emotionally traumatized, separated from their parents and each other, but some were also sexually traumatized. Claire was horrified to learn that her 9-year-old son was attacked by a CPS worker if he masturbated, and he did not even know what that word was. She said he wasn't even placed in a foster home, but spent 3 days in a homeless shelter with other homeless adults and children. Only 36 hours away from home, this child's innocence was lost. Despite the fact that there were no sexual allegations in their previous case, 4 of their children received sexual assault exams. Claire discovered that the 1.5-year-old had to be restrained with ropes during the exam, two of the children told her. I don't want to see that doctor again. I could have gotten germs. It was really gross. They touched me down there and they didn't have gloves on. They looked down there and they touched down there and they touched in there, is what it says in the insert, one of the children said. Claire discovered that in the foster homes where 4 of her girls were placed, one night a foster boy named Simon, who was around 10, was allowed to have a sleepover in her girls' room, in her 5-year-old daughter's bed. The other girls told their mom later that the 5-year-old had wet her bed and was troubled the next morning. To this day, she has been having regular accidents because of this traumatic event, reports Claire. For children in foster care, these types of abuses are more common than many realize. And they want you to click on the link here that says U.S. Foster Care System, Modern Day Slavery and Child Trafficking. So you can read more on that there. And the article goes on, says, taking time to heal from CPS issues. The Rebuses had moved to Montague County for 8 months of rest and healing after being terrorized by Collin County CPS last summer. Although anonymous allegations continued to be made against the Rebus family during this time, the social worker in Montague County appreciated that the allegations being made were clearly not neglect, and even testified in court last year that he had no concerns about the Rebus family. Claire revealed how her family could finally rest and heal after their terrifying ordeal with CPS. And the insert here says that by the grace of God, we were blessed with a country home that meets our needs. It was temporary housing, but it was exactly what we needed at the time. Secluded, beautiful, a resting place for our weary souls. During this period of time, we spent many, many hours simply enjoying our family. My husband worked very little hours, and my small business of 4 years was put on hold. Our days and nights were filled with country air, small town hospitality, new friends, and we were ministered to. God used the CPS tragedy to bring us closer together and to strengthen us. We connected with a tiny Baptist church out in the country. They poured into our family in so many ways. My husband became close friends with the pastor, helping to heal his wounded soul. This was very much needed, as it was some members of our son's previous church that called CPS on us, causing our children to be removed. Previous attorney warned Claire of an advocate making allegations. Last year, Claire says she was informed through various sources, including her attorney, that someone who was acting as an advocate was also making allegations to CPS, even after the family moved from Collin County to Montague County. Claire wonders if this same advocate has continued to make allegations, causing Lubbock County to be on high alert as soon as they moved to town. Claire explains that when their case was dismissed last year, the attorney advised them to file a lawsuit against CPS as soon as possible before they came back, because it was clear to him that CPS was not planning to leave them alone. And the article goes on and says, Lubbock police investigate allegations about a wandering child and find no concern. And Claire recalls, on the afternoon of May 16th, my husband drove the van across the street to the coffee shop before heading into work. He left the house through the garage so that all the locks on the front door could remain locked. About 10 minutes after my husband left, there was a police officer at our front door. I was terrified, thinking something terrible must have happened to my husband. When I opened the door, I saw a woman next to a car across the street, and she was staring at the officer and I. The officer told me that they had received a call from someone stating that one of our children was wandering outside without supervision and that this child had a wet pamper. I was shocked. I asked the girls if they knew what he was talking about, and they told me that Sunday was in the front yard and that Pocahontas brought her back inside. I told the officer that I didn't know how she got out. I told him that if the person who called was so concerned, why then didn't she knock on the door or ring the doorbell so that she could talk to me? Then he told me that she didn't do that because the girls told her I was asleep. I told the officer that the kids and I were outside working on our garden, and that if she had just rung the doorbell, she could have spoke to me about her concerns. I told the officer that we would figure out how she was able to get out and then secure that exit. When the officer left, the lady stopped him to talk. The lady found out that the officer was not going to report us to CPS, so she called them herself. CPS showed up lightning fast. And the article goes on and says, when Officer Scott investigated and saw that everything was under control, the family believes the investigation should have ended there, but it didn't. Social workers enlist neighbors to spy on the Rimbus family. Claire learned that Lubbock County social worker Kristen Shecklin had been enlisting neighbors to spy on her family. We'd only been here for about 2 weeks before CPS got involved. We hadn't had a chance to even get to know our neighbors before they were told that we are abusive and neglectful. Not only is it against CPS own policies to share confidential information like this, but now we are dealing with defamation of character issues. And they got a couple of pictures of complaints and stuff here if you want to see those. It says social worker demands to investigate. Since there was no imminent danger and no warrant, the Rimbus initially refused to allow the social workers to investigate, as is their Fourth Amendment right. But under duress and coercion, they allowed Shecklin and her supervisor, Joellen Caraway, to inspect their home and interviewed their children on May the 16th. And Claire recalls, they kept blackmailing me by saying that they were going to get a search warrant if we didn't cooperate. I told them that if they were granted a search warrant, it would be because they lied to the judge. I told them that our children's lives were not in danger. I also offered to take photos of the kids in the house with my phone so that they could see that everything was okay. They said that wasn't good enough. Kristen said something like, "We will be right back with a court order," she said in a sarcastic, power tripping kind of way. They walked back to their vehicle, and then my husband pulled up. He came inside, and after I gave him a brief synopsis of what had happened, he left to go to the courthouse so that he could speak with the judge when they met with him to get the search warrant. They hadn't filed anything in an attempt to obtain an order, so my husband left and went to the CPS offices. He spoke with the supervisor, and he asked her what had to be done to get them to leave us alone. He told her that our kids had endured so much trauma by what they did last summer. He also told the supervisor about the traumatic sexual assault exam done to Sunday for no reason at all. He also told her that we didn't have the money for an attorney at this time. He also told her that we had just moved in and didn't have our furniture yet. She assured him that wouldn't be used against us. So when my husband came back home, the CPS worker came in behind him. They went into every room, looked in our refrigerator, and then told us it was time for the kids' interviews. I told the worker I would be recording them. She said that I couldn't. I told her that I could, that I wasn't breaking the law by doing so. I explained to her that it was imperative to document in case they lied about something. Well, then she turned around and started walking out the door saying, "You aren't cooperating, so I'm getting a court order." Then my husband quickly said, "No, no, no." And he told her that she could do the interviews. Then she told us that she had on a recording device and she would share the recordings with us at a later date. Oh, the irony. The kids took turns going out on the porch. They introduced themselves, said they didn't want to speak, and then came back in, all of them. At the conclusion of the visit, I asked her if she had any concerns. The only concern that she stated was that our youngest didn't have a crib. She asked if she could buy him one, and I said yes. She brought it back later that night, and then we never heard from her again. A case of double jeopardy? Because all the children had refused to speak to her on May the 16th, Shecklin claimed in her affidavit that her interviews were not productive in gathering information to find out the children are safe and have their basic needs met. On June the 16th, she filed an order in aid of investigation of child abuse or neglect 30 days after the initial investigation, with a hearing scheduled for June the 29th. Claire emphasizes, in the affidavit filed, she told the judge that we wouldn't let her investigate us. So she asked for permission to come inside and take photos and to take the kids to Children's Advocacy Center for interviews and photos of their bodies if they wanted them. Claire says that the CPS affidavit was full of lies, mostly from their CPS history, which were allegations that had already been dismissed as harassment. The Rembes filed an affidavit disputing all the accusations CPS made, but say that their affidavit was not included in the court documents, which was illegal. The Rembes pointed out to CPS that the allegations from a closed case was a violation of their own policy and procedure. The Rembes also declare that Fifth Amendment protects them from double jeopardy. Regardless, Judge Kevin Hart requests to continue to investigate Rembes. Claire says that when Shecklin showed up on June the 30th to take children for interview at the CAC, she informed them that she filed for a de novo hearing, hoping Hart's ruling would be overturned. And it has a picture of the judge, Kevin Hart, and it says was sworn associate judge on December the 18th, 2000, inside the 72nd District Courtroom at the Lubbock County Courthouse. And then it says, Judge Hart defies Americans with Disabilities Act. And it goes on, talks about prosecuting attorney considered de novo hearing as a waste of time. And it talks about Rembes is accused of being anti-CPS during the de novo hearing. And this goes on and on and on, more and more stuff. So if you want to read all that, it's right there for you to read. But I mean, these people are just being harassed, something awful. And their kids being terrorized by the CPS. Good golly. I mean, this is worse than a Gestapo. So there you have all that to educate yourself with what's going on with. Next one that I have here is NASA's hopes for Mars in the future are at stake in the 2016 election. And this is off of Verge.com. And it says here, the election years are a tense time for NASA. A new president can completely alter NASA's long-term goals by resetting the space agency's agenda. Whoever's elected will face a choice, change the focus or scope of NASA's goals or keep things going on the same track. And given the uncertainty that has plagued NASA for a while, it's very possible major changes are on the horizon. NASA's human spaceflight program stands at a significant crossroads. For the past 5 years, the space agency has been moving from now dead space shuttle program to Journey to Mars. NASA's goal of sending humans to Red Planet by 2030s, but this transition has lacked direction. NASA has yet to lay out a timeline of the mission it plans to do to get humans to Mars, nor has it outlined the architecture needed to keep people alive on the planet, such as habitats, landers, life support systems, and more. This lack of detail has been criticized by Congress, which has also questioned if NASA even has enough funding for a Mars trip. And on top of that, the vehicle that NASA is building to take people to Mars will likely run over budget and miss important deadlines, according to government reports. This election has given voters little insight into what either candidate would do. The candidates' views on space policy have been more or less absent from political conversation. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's remarks on NASA have been brief, vague, and at times confusing. Clinton has offered her support for NASA, but won't elaborate on what that means exactly. And Trump is eager to make America great in space again, but also doesn't delve into specifics. But eventually, whoever assumes the office will be confronted with the current state of NASA. What I do know is both of them are going to confront the same reality if they are elected. Jim Muncie, founder of Polyspace, a space policy consulting agency, tells The Verge. And the same reality is that the program of record doesn't fit inside any reasonably projected long-term budget. The space agency has been developing two major vehicles to take humans into deep space: the Orion crew capsule, which can hold a crew of 4 astronauts, and the Space Launch System, SLS, a giant heavy lift rocket. The SLS is scheduled to fly for the first time in 2018, taking an uncrewed version of Orion into orbit around the moon. Then people are supposed to fly on the Orion SLS combo for the first time in 2023, though NASA is working toward an aggressive internal date of 2021. After that, an uncrewed mission to Jupiter's moon, Europa, mandated by Congress, is set for mid-2020s, but not much else has been confirmed for the SLS and Orion. There is mostly bipartisan support for both SLS and Orion in Congress, which means that they could survive the next administration change. One thing you do see is multiple statements in support of NASA's major hardware program, says Casey Dreer, Director of Space Policy for the Planetary Society. SLS and Orion are likely to continue because you have a broad amount of support from people in Congress who are in a position to keep them going. What does divide policy experts, though, is where to send these vehicles. The tentative plan for SLS after its second test flight is to send it on the contentious asteroid redirect mission. The program involves grabbing a small boulder off a near-Earth asteroid, bringing it into orbit around the moon, and then sending astronauts on the SLS to explore the space rock in lunar orbit. NASA has said the mission is mostly about testing out technologies needed for the Mars trip. The initiative has been panned by many within Congress as well as industry experts. The Small Bodies Assessment Group, a NASA-established organization that identifies priorities for how to explore asteroids and comets, has been super critical of the mission in the past, saying the mission is not a cost-effective way to address science goals. A program with so few supporters may be the first to get cut. If the next president wants to come in and make a break with past administration, but not still fundamentally disrupt NASA as a whole, I think ending ARM is a clear political way to go, says Dreer. But perhaps the longest ongoing debate has been whether going to Mars even makes sense for NASA. Congress has repeatedly questioned if the space agency will have the budget for such a complex mission, which could easily reach hundreds of billions to pull off. And NASA's human exploration program only receives about $4 billion each year. Congress has also criticized NASA for not laying out timeline for all missions the space agency will need to do to get to the red planet, leaving the journey to Mars largely unidentified. They don't really have plans for what to do with Orion and the SLS after the second mission, says Muncie, nor has NASA provided details about other technologies it still needs to develop, such as the interplanetary transit vehicle that will take astronauts back and forth from Mars, or the habitats that will keep people alive on the Martian surface. NASA has released a 36-page document about its strategy for getting to Mars, which has been criticized for lacking specifics. In fact, many people in Congress would rather return to the moon instead, but the moon has been off the table as a destination during the Obama administration. President Obama said the U.S. wouldn't return to the moon because we've been there before. Oh, and it jumps. Isn't that wonderful? There we go. During a 2010 speech at Kennedy Space Center that outlined the agenda for America's current space policy that offensively squashed all of NASA's plans to go to the lunar surface while Obama was in office. Though a moon mission is not explicitly forbidden, in NASA's 2010 Authorization Act, which lays out the U.S. space policy, the idea of returning to the lunar surface hasn't been openly considered by NASA since. With Obama gone next year, that may change. And many congressional staffers are making moves to exploit the president's departure. Recently, the House came out with the draft that, oops, shut that off, okay. Making moves to exploit the president's departure. Recently, the House came out with a draft of a bill that would fund NASA for 2017 fiscal year. In it, the bill gets rid of funding for ARM and encourages NASA to return to the moon instead. With Congress support, revisiting the moon could become a very real possibility again. Starting next year, I'm not saying Mars will get de-emphasized, but I don't think the moon will be off the table anymore, says Muncie. The moon may be an attractive option to the new president as well. A Mars trip is decades away, but a moon mission would be conducted on much shorter time scale, and moon mission could keep the public enthusiastic about the state of America's space program. NASA has already proposed sending SLS and Orion space stations in the vicinity of the moon. The vehicles could be used to take people to the lunar surface as well. A lunar mission could also be an effective political tool for the next administration by bringing in international partners. If you look at the history of human space flight in the U.S., it's driven more by geopolitical issues. Scott Pace, director of the Space Policy Institute at George Washington University, tells The Verge most of the international space agencies, including European Space Agency, Russia, and China, are focused on the moon. It's a more attainable goal for them. A NASA-led lunar mission could foster international space cooperation with these state agencies that a Mars mission can't. To get people to do things with you, you have to have goals they can be part of, says Pace, and Mars and asteroids are basically too challenging and too difficult for other countries to participate in. I think any candidate of either party would re-embrace the idea of an international-led return to the moon because there are more opportunities for partnerships, commercial and international. It's more doable. And if other countries are cooperating with the U.S. on space missions, they may be more likely to cooperate in other areas too. But because neither candidate has talked much about NASA, it's hard to know whether they're interested in the moon. Trump does not have close ties with former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich, who has been a vocal advocate for returning to the moon. It's possible that Gingrich may influence Trump's space policy if elected, but the theme of Trump's statements on space seem to show that space policy is not in the forefront of his mind. In a recent questionnaire for the American Institute for Aeronautics and Astronautics, AIAA, Trump said his space policies will be determined based on the U.S.'s overall economy. It's sentiment that he's echoed a few times throughout the campaign. His idea is let's fix potholes first before we talk about Mars, says Denner. Nor has Clinton said much about her space agenda. Perhaps most insight we have into Clinton's space policy comes from a town hall she did in Dover, New Hampshire in July of 2015. When asked about whether or not NASA should continue, Clinton responded that she really does support space program because of its ability to create new business. However, it's not clear how Clinton's support for NASA will translate into action. It could entail increasing funding or perhaps a different focus. However, Clinton has somewhat positioned herself as a kind of third term for President Obama, so she could continue many of the same policies that he laid out when he came into office. That may not bode well for the moon return. However, Clinton will likely take advice on how to craft space policy from her former advisor, Lori Garver, who is a big proponent of making NASA more efficient. Garver advised Clinton during 2018 campaign and was asked to help advise President Obama on NASA's deputy administrator. Let's see. Whoops, skipped a line there. Garver advised Clinton during her 2008 campaign and was asked to advise President Obama on NASA during his transition to the White House. She eventually went on to serve as NASA's deputy administrator from 2009 to 2013. Clinton may turn to Garver again should she be elected. Garver has been very critical of NASA's big budget programs and favors a stronger focus on partnering with private sector. That could mean more programs like commercial cargo and commercial crew, in which NASA buys space flight services from private companies. Not knowing what either candidate has planned may be frustrating, especially to those in the space program, but the silence on space policy may actually be a good thing. According to Dreher, I've actually been arguing for our next president not to put space front and center, says Dreher, for issues that don't have a pre-existing ideological bend. If you tie it to a presidential agenda, you create a ton of incentive for opposition party to stymie and block that for no other reason than to undermine the president being successful. That uncertainty for NASA, but Dreer may be right. The less the candidates say, the more they can do. So until November, the people at NASA will continue down the journey to Mars, knowing that there's a strong possibility they may soon change direction. You have the news on NASA. The next one is your operation, I guess. I thought this was interesting. A woman turns her Brooklyn home into a lush urban jungle, and it's off of Oddity Central. And there's basically what it is this lady took her home in Brooklyn and she started raising plants. I mean, just all kinds of plants. And there's pictures in the article if you want to take a look at it. Her home looks like a jungle. It says, fashion model Summer Rain Oaks has been living in a 1,200 square foot converted industrial space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn for 11 years. And during that time, she has managed to turn it into a stunning oasis filled with 500 plants, including a living wall, an irrigated vertical garden, a closet garden, edibles, and exotic species. I think that is the only way I've really been able to survive in New York is by surrounding myself with plants, Oaks told Modern Farmer magazine, which makes sense considering she grew up in a country house on 5 acres of land in rural northeastern Pennsylvania, surrounded by domestic animals and lots of plants. It was fashion modeling that first brought her to the Big Apple, but that and everything else she's been involved in since relocating to the big city has been about raising awareness to the environment. It was modeling that at the start because at that point in time, I wanted to look at how I could bring environmental awareness out to a wider audience. Summer said in an interview with the looks like 6 square feet. I got kind of stuck on the idea, but that could do it through fashion. Not that I had ever really been involved or interested in it. I didn't even know how to get out or get there other than by meeting people, putting myself back into my 18-year-old self. It was the idea of, wow, I think fashion could be really cool way to disseminate environmental awareness. And the article goes on if you want to read it and take a look at the pictures in this. I mean, the place is stunning. It really is stunning. And she's done a real good job with these plants. It looks like she really takes good care of it. I mean, if she didn't, they wouldn't live, right? But whether or not she's bringing on a lot of social awareness to the environment, I don't know. But I know that with all of that in her home, she's got herself back to nature. She's got some balance in her life. And it just goes to show you, no matter where you live, you know, she's living in New York. So there's no excuse that other people can't grow plants in their home, grow edibles in their home. You know, we've talked about preparedness and all that. You need you some seeds and you need you some good soil, a little fertilizer and some water, and, you know, start growing something. Even if you're growing it in your house, you know, learn how to grow things. It's good for you. It's good for your balance. It can be good for your diet if you grow you something that you can eat. And it's fun. It's fun to learn how to do that kind of stuff you don't know how. And if you do know how, well, you know, you increase your own knowledge base. You know, grow something that you haven't grown before. Learn something new. It's not going to hurt you. So with that, I think I'm going to close her down. I really appreciate everybody bearing with me. And we'll do another show for you tomorrow. And it'll be a pre-recorded one. And we'll be back live on Monday. So if you want to drop me any comments, you're welcome to do so. I hope that you're enjoying all this. I know I'm enjoying bringing it to you. And we'll talk to you later on. Bye.